Welcome to the 12 Days of Edition Wars, featuring 2nd edition AD&D Players and DM's Option books. In this series, we are taking a close look at these special books that are often considered D&D 2.5. On the 5th day of Edition Wars, my DM gave to me Combat and Tactics Part 2. Look, I'm disappointed as you are that it's not 5 gold rings. It's the one people come running in from the other room to sing. We all know it. It's cool.
You know, I think if somebody gave me D&D books, I would be just as happy with them as I would 5 golden rings.
I've read the books. You can have both. 5 gold rings. That's a pretty good magic item.
But is it a ring of protection? Is it a ring of invisibility? Is it featherfall?
Could be 5 rings of protection. They just need stacking properties.
So, what chapter are we on?
Last time, we made it all the way through Chapter 1 of this book.
We didn't talk at all about. I thought we talked about
podcasting.
Chapter 2.
We did not.
Ah, crap. Okay.
Not one word.
For those of you playing at home, we thought we were going to make these little short, cute 12 Days of Christmas podcasts. But Brandis and I, we really like to talk about the game.
That is accurate.
There you go. All right. 2nd chapter, combat options.
Yeah, so this one is pretty cool. As a chapter, like at the idea level, it's doing neat stuff because it is really leaning into giving fighters a lot of different ways to, engage with their opponents and what their opponents have going on. The downside that I see here is that it seems to believe you're going to be spending a lot of time fighting humanoid opponents and a lot less time fighting, overtly monstrous things with a highly extraneous number of appendages. And frankly, the artwork reflects that for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair though, this whole first part it's more like it's about war formations.
Right.
So
exactly.
So if you're in a war, theoretically, a large majority of the opposing army will be humanoid type creatures. If that's, yes. Well, of course, right? I mean, this is the thing, right? I think this book, it has this issue of trying to be realistic in certain things and trying to stay fantasy in certain things. And we ran into that in the last chapter too, where, you want to have these miniatures with facing and all these other things, but, your reality is bumping up against your fantasy world, is bumping up against, real life time in the game and things like that. And I think this section probably has a similar problem.
So we've got a good range of battle tactics and attack options, and then we get into fighting styles and such. And I think it's really good for just getting you to, like I said, think about the battlefield as a place, and think about all the different things you can try to do to an enemy character without really leaning into called shots, though called shots is one of the attack options. So for our battle tactics, there are shield walls, and there's rules for how those work against missile fire and how it works against melee attacks. And then you have spear hedges, mounted charges, archery from horseback, and in case anyone's forgotten, since yesterday, for you listening yesterday, I gleefully do 20 minutes on Parthian archery. That's accurate, but there's a sense here that you're going to see massed mounted charges facing off against horse archers, right? I don't know that I've seen that happen too many times in all the D&D I've played. I'm not opposed in principle, but it doesn't happen that much. And so it's interesting that this set of rules treats it as something you need to know. Uh, but without digging into these rules too deeply and getting into all the different things that cause -2 penalties to this and that, um, and +1 bonuses here and there. It's a good number of major field options, and it feels like a lot of what goes on in warfare from uh, Roman times on through very shortly pre-Napoleonic times, right? Because they don't have anything specifically for artillery fire.
Right. And also, just as a when you read this, it's talking about sapping, a shield punch, shield rush, grabbing, tripping, overbearing. I mean, these are, if you want your fighter to rush in and do something other than I swing my sword, right? And remember, up until this time, that really was all your fighter could do. There were no mechanics for doing other things, right? You could narrate the hell out of it and do, however you wanted to, talk about it. But in terms of mechanics, of bonuses and penalties and whatever that could make it more mechanically interesting, that stuff wasn't there until this.
Right. Like the attack options. I feel like a good number of these showed up in the Complete Fighter's Handbook, right? I don't think it's literally the first time they've seen print, but
well, yeah. So of course, yeah. I'm more talking about this edition. I don't necessarily mean this book.
Sure.
Yeah. So.
I'm not going through the first ed material I have right now to see if that's absolutely true, but.
Also, can I make a quick digression too? Because on page 48,
I think we both know that neither of us can be stopped from digressing.
I know, right? That's true. There's an awesome picture on page 48.
That is a large frog. That is a large and worrying frog.
An enormous orange frog jumping out of the jungle, and combating a spear tip held by some sort of barbarian fighter person. It's an interesting picture. I like it.
Yeah, I personally. I hope that it's a Slod and that we're seeing, what's supposed to be an incredibly badass character fighting some horrible Slod. That would be awesome.
Well, look at the teeth. Look at the teeth.
Yeah,
frog don't have teeth like that. Frogs have vomarine teeth, which do not look like that.
You with your zoology.
I know. Sorry, biologist. Can't help it. But yes, I do. I sound like I'm making fun of it. I actually do like the art. It's
cool. I do think it's cool. And like, if that's viable evidence that it's supposed to be a Slod, then let's do this. That's awesome.
Yeah, let's do it.
So yeah, just to run down the attack options here, you have block, called shot, disarm, grab, overbear, pin, pull or trip, sap, shield punch, shield rush, unarmed attack, unhorse, and special weapon maneuver, which is going to be your catch-all for other kinds of stuff. Bolas, chains, harpoons, lassos, man catchers, and nets. Whatever it is that one weapon special trick, and that the sort of code for that weapon's trick is going to be in the weapon tree itself. But a lot of these operate on opposed rolls, and the whole so by leaning into opposed rolls, it is sort of getting into some of the roll under but as close to your number as possible opposed roll oddities of second ed, and ties extend the contest one round. It's one of sort of the recurring questions with any kind of opposed check or opposed roll. What happens on a tie?
Right.
Well, but anyway, a lot of these are things that either exist in 5th edition or have been, house ruled in or offered by DM's Guild products. Block is really just dodge.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is just a kind of odd and clunky way to offer a parrying mechanic, and it doesn't work as well as 5th Ed's dodge or the parry maneuver of the Battlemaster Fighter, but that's life. You know what? Called shots. Nope. Right in the garbage bin. Sorry. Nope.
This version, or just called shots in
Just
general?
Just called shots.
Yeah.
Nope. Just find some game that isn't D&D for your called shots. D&D does not do that. I have never seen a called shot system that I did not hate with a special venom, and the examples of how this is supposed to be used are a fantastic highlight of why, because it is all about gaming a knowledge of the opponent's AC in their unarmored head location or whatever, and just don't do that, because it really leans into, well, if you're not wearing a helmet, then it's cool that you have all this other plate armor on, but really your AC is 6. Thanks for playing. Because you've got this AC 10, and then there's a -4 penalty to the attack, so AC 6, great. It's not worth anyone's time. I'm just not here for that. So disarm, good disarm mechanics are hard. And one of the interesting things about what block and disarm have going on is that they're opposed roles, sort of, but they have the attacker and the defender targeting different numbers. The defender's target is 4 points easier. It's AC 4 rather than AC 0, and that's a choice. And I'm not sure what goes on there, but that's a choice. Here again, you have example text that sort of highlights.
I wonder if it's meant to sort of take care of the idea that the person is holding on to their weapon, so they have a grip, right?
Maybe.
And so therefore it's harder to break a grip than, so it's, I don't know. Yeah.
We don't get a clear sense of what the logic is. It's fine. The trick with disarms is always, well, who has the action advantage on doing something about the weapon on the ground? If it's the PC, then they might be too easily taking that whole opponent out of the combat. If it's the target, then they might be making disarm pointless. And I haven't actually seen a D&D variation that I felt resolved that tension well, because I don't know what resolving it well would even look like.
I'm not sure you can.
Yeah.
I'm not sure you can.
I have strong feelings about this from LARPing, where the disarm rules are such that because it's a LARP, there's no superior action economy opportunity to pick up the weapon, but also there's a general sort of understanding that probably you are getting the opponent out of the combat for 5, 10, 15 seconds, not taking them out completely because they have no weapon. Anyway, it's fine. I'm weird about disarms for that reason. And then you have grabs that are kind of disarm, but also I want it immediately instead of putting it on the ground. Because grabs are about grabbing weapons or important items away from opponents. And it says if you want to actually grab your opponent by the lapels or whatever, that's wrestling. Overbearing, which is just a dog pile, and it provokes opportunity attacks because you have to actually get up in someone's business to overbear them. But it's certainly one of the only ways that uh, very low end minions are going to be any threat at all to a even modest level character in second edition.
Sure. I mean, I guess though the thing about every single one of these rules is that, and with their list of modifiers and whatnot, it's really about overbearing the process.
Sure.
It's gonna ground your game to an extremely slow, trying to work through each of these every single round.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of roles that go into a bunch of these, and where these have made it into fifth edition, they've been simplified dramatically,
Right.
and that's a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, one of these days we're going to have to do an episode on grappling, and then we can discover the podcasting sound of me skating blood from my eyes.
Oh, I would love to talk to you about the grappling rules of first edition AD&D.
That noise you hear right now. Oh Lord.
But anyway.
So then we get into pull and trip, which is various kinds of knockdowns. So always good stuff. Everyone loves a good knockdown, and there's a table of modifiers for this. Sure. Sapping it describes itself as a variant called shot that has size limits for odd reasons. And yeah, it just gives you a percentage chance to straight knock out the target just bypassing all the hit points. That seems fine.
If you're a monk.
Yeah. Well, you're not a monk in second edition. That's
right.
Pretty clear.
Exactly. But that's kind of my point.
Yeah. But the idea is that, I mean, it's supposed to be a blackjack to the back of the head kind of thing.
Sure.
And in the LARPs I play, that's absolutely a substantial part of rogue gameplay, and I respect that. Lord knows we keep trying to design it, sort of warts and all, but this is an especially unlovely implementation, because in addition to your percent chance to just skip all of their hit points, you also have to deal with splitting between real damage and temporary damage, and ain't nobody got time for that.
Well, they do, because of all the other time that they're spending on the other players with their combat round with all of these tactics, you see.
Oh, God. Yeah. So shield punching is the next attack option, and I have a certain amount of sympathy for the desire to include this. I certainly know that in real shield combat, shield bashing is a big part of what you use that giant door strapped to your arm for, and that's very cool to me. As a particular implementation, this is fine. It's fine. I don't have much against it. There's sort of there's a baseline penalty.
It's generally on par with.
It's generally on par with 2-up fighting. There's baseline penalties that are the same as 2-up fighting, which you can mitigate with a bonus from a high dexterity score using your reaction adjustment. So that's fine. Shield rushing is just a different form of the pull trip deal, but it relies on having a shield. That's fine. And it has a similar but more, but curiously, I guess less generous table of modifiers, because there's no -6 penalty if the defender was stationary. I don't know why that's. I don't know what's going on. I don't know why it's missing. I already mentioned special weapon maneuver. So trap is basically about binding your opponent's weapon to like close with them so they can't use that giant greatsword or halberd or whatever, or pinning your opponent's weapon against a wall. And this is funny to me because in working on Seas of Odari, I'm working with Sean on a attack option to do exactly that. Like I worked on that today, this morning. So
Right.
this is very current for me. I mean, this implementation is sort of very similar to grab and disarm in its function. Then there's trap and break, which is for the fairly small number of weapons that are specialized in breaking a target's weapon, like the sword breaker.
Mm-hmm.
Unarmed attack. It pretty much just points you to chapter 5. Cool, thanks. Anyway.
It literally does.
Yeah, I'm not excited about getting to chapter 5 because unarmed combat, my man, it is a thing. So unhorse is another one that is a pretty viable option in 5th, except that you just work it as a shove attack against a mounted creature, or anything that imposes the prone condition. But this goes through different ways to unhorse a mounted character, so it's essentially just a container of other attack options. And that's it for our attack options. And like I said, overall, these are fine. The implementations are just very second ed.
Yeah, you have to understand too the context of these rules is that we keep comparing it to 5th edition, right? Because that's the current edition, and we're deep into 5th edition and all that. But 5th edition, one of its goals was to simplify, and so when they're writing about unhorsing or blocking or grappling or whatever, they're doing it with an eye toward making something fast and fun and not so detailed that the game bogs down, right? Because the design ethos of 5th edition is very different. But in 2nd edition, with this book right here, the point of this section, or the point of this, plus and minus 2 and all of these little intricate details, that was the point of it. They were trying to produce something that was full of options and details and minutia so that people could use it if they wanted to, and it would maybe allow for someone to have a sort of more mechanically cinematic combat.
For sure. And it's all aimed at threading the needle between verisimilitude and game balance,
right?
And as I say, like it's very much a product of the rule set it's operating in.
Sure.
And so that's fine. I'm criticizing it from the year of our Lord 2019.
Let's be fair. No, I criticized it back then too.
oh, sure. Like, I'm not saying it was especially graceful then. But
I think the design ethos was so different that the criticisms that I have now of it are very different from the criticisms I had back then.
Right. Let's just not get so wrapped up in one view of things that we don't at least tip our hats to them for trying to expand the range of options and embrace action as an ethos
and
in itself.
That's kind of where I was going with I don't want the listeners to think that just because we keep sort of referencing 5th edition that we're making a comparison that is favorable to 5th edition and unfavorable to 2nd edition. I think there are certain things that are brought by this set of books that if this book didn't exist, 3rd edition for one would be extremely different. And if 3rd edition was extremely different, 4th edition would be extremely different. And if 4th edition was extremely different, we would not have the 5th edition that we have right now. So there is a direct lineage here. So I guess I'm saying I'm not, I sort of have a more negative view of this book than a lot of people maybe. But I still also appreciate it for what it did bring to the game. And I feel like they hit several of their goals. They missed some too, but I think they hit several of their goals. So I just wanted to say that before we move on, because as we keep going, I'm going to get more and more critical.
Right. Well, and as to your point about third edition, like that AC 0 for the attacker versus AC 4 for the defender, well, that looks a lot like make your trip attack with a -4 penalty.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like they've changed what you're targeting, but like that's what they're trying to. That's what they're translating into third edition, and so like if you went straight from vanilla second ed to 3.0 on release day, it looked like a revolution. It looked like there were so few points in common between the two editions that like you could reasonably ask yourself,
Right.
is this still D&D? If you were with them the whole way through skills and powers, so much of third edition becomes much clearer as, oh, you just cleaned up combat and tactics and cut the stuff that was jankiest.
Yeah.
Good game.
Yep.
Right? Like there's a whole combat chapter in third edition that is just kind of a cleanup and a fresh typeface and some fresh photography work of moving minis on the map
Right.
of what's going on here.
Yeah.
So then we get into fighting styles. And there's not a lot new under the sun for fighting styles because, I mean, we mostly have two hands. The game has never made a credible effort to support characters that are missing a hand. Like you can play that, and it's a disability. Combat and tactics will, I think, pay you points for it in the flaws section, but overall, it's not trying to make it balanced against having two hands. That's not a concept. So here we do have a single weapon style that could be phrased as trying to make that balanced, but it's sort of doing that and sort of not, and it is operating on the idea that you'd be using your offhand for some of the attack option maneuvers, such as punches or grabs, which, in fairness, is a whole character aesthetic that I am still in love with. I played it in 4th edition with the brawling fighter build, and that was one of my favorite characters that I ever played in all of 4th edition, and like that's still not out of my system. It was so good. But when you get into two-handed weapons and the one-handed weapons wielded with two hands, etc., weapon and shield, yep, good. No surprises to be found here. Two-weapon, yep, good. Notably, the two-weapon rules are almost exactly as they appear in third, except that I don't believe you get to wipe out any of your attack penalty with your two weapons just from your high dexterity score in third ed. That's fine. Then unarmed, which I'm sorry, you're going to be hearing a lot of this in this episode and maybe also next, but yeah, don't do that. And finally, missile and thrown weapon, your archer and your thrown styles. So that's good times. And there's nothing especially new or surprising to be found in those. And then
dueling.
And then dueling. Yeah. So then we get 1, 2, 3, 4. We get 5 pages. Well, 4 pages really, because there's one more section later on. But we get 4 pages on dueling, and it is an attempt to make a duel between two characters as active and engaging as a whole fight that includes the whole party. That said, the duel doesn't in any way include the whole party. so it's just spotlight time for one character. And it is dragging out that spotlight time by introducing far more dice rolls.
Yes, it introduces page 52, which is this amazingly thought out series of how to roll a die and let it inform your defense and attack and movement.
Right.
And notice I didn't say amazingly well thought out. I just said amazingly thought out.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, like what gets me is that it's so clearly doing
Yes.
a Street Fighter thing,
yes,
right? Like
right.
it's trying to be Street Fighter, and that is such
Yeah.
a weird idea. That is a balls out weird idea.
It introduces this little mini game of now. So to be fair, I mean I'm making fun of it a little bit, but if I was a DM and I was running a one-on-one campaign where it was one DM and one player, right, and maybe they had a couple of hirelings or something, and I needed to make a fight seem dynamic and meaty and interesting, I might decide to implement this.
And that's fair.
And that would be an appropriate use of it.
I do agree with that.
But
Or if you were really going to give every character at the table this level of spotlight time in a session, like that would be hard, but it's not inconceivable.
But I don't think I would do it if I had a whole party, though. I think I think the value in this is that it is a well thought out. I mean, some of the here I go. All right, like some of it feels very well thought out. Where it's going for a particular style, as you said, this sort of Street Fighter thing, and I respect what they created with it. It feels very out of place, though, because Dungeons and Dragons is, in general, and at this time was, in general, a group activity. And while there is room for one-on-one play, and while I know that that's been going on for a long time, this book, all the other parts of it are aimed at how to make the group have individuals that are interesting and do these cool things, but they're still part of a group. And this is just something else. It's just something not. It's just not. It's not, it's unlike anything else. It's what it's like. It's like somebody wrote a really awesome article for Dragon Magazine, and they liked it so much they decided to just throw it into this chapter.
Yeah.
And it's kind of separate from everything else.
What it really wants is for someone to say, "You're using Bonetti's defense against me, eh?"
Right.
Like, if they could get to that so that a player could somehow respond as God intended,
right.
I thought it fitting, considering the rocky terrain, then you're off to the races, and I am in this. I will play this character. I will play your system. Whatever. Let's do it.
Right.
But it's they don't quite get that tone, and they really want to, and it makes me sad. But yeah, there's a bunch of tables that follow on this with choice of defense and choice of attack, and I'm glad someone started the conversation on how to do this well. But this is not an implementation that moves fast enough to achieve what they want to achieve.
Right. I agree with that assessment.
And finishing out the chapter, you get Heroic Phrase, which goes back to an OD&D and possibly even chainmail rule, where if you're fighting just scad hordes of really low-end mooks, then you get lots and lots of extra attacks per round to plow through them with grace and speed.
Right.
It's warriors facing adversaries far less skillful than themselves can double their normal rate of attack and gain 1 extra attack per round that is used for a limited list of attack options.
Mhm.
So they're trying to create 4th edition's minion rules,
Right.
just in a sort of odd, awkward way.
Well, but for the time, this little section, just this little, 4 paragraphs or something, it's actually quite elegant and quite eloquent for what they're trying to do. Now, I'm not sure if it ever got implemented very well, but as a quick, here's, if you want this kind of scene, this is the complete opposite of the very last section, which was individual duels with villains and blah, blah, blah. Now we're talking about, okay, well, forget that. Now let's talk about an enormous war, but it's not an enormous war with gentlemen where everybody's lined up and you're all going to shoot at each other or rush at each other and your swords are going to hit at the same time. This is the horde of goblins is swimming out of the ocean and overtaking your ship. And they're there's so many of them, they are crawling all over. How do you adjudicate that?
Yep.
And this is how.
Right. And if you watch the Battle of Winterfell, I mean, this is a really pretty good set of rules on what that looked like. And we saw, these top-end fighters that we've been following the whole series just mowing their way through lots and lots and lots of zombies. So, yeah, that was the thing.
Yeah. So let's move on.
Yeah, so chapter 3. So about our thesis that they think you're going to be playing a lot of wars.
Yeah.
This chapter is here for that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Lord. And so it goes into deep and SAT vocabulary intensive detail on terrain and location. I'm pretty sure D&D is how I learned the word escarpment.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly also topography.
I have to tell you that this section makes my little biologist heart go pitter-patter. The ecologist in me is like, oh, this is awesome. I not the mechanical parts of it, but just the idea of, they're not just like, oh, here's the battlefield and, here's some tactics to use in large battles. It's like, no, here's the battlefield. And you know what? If it's a swamp versus a badlands, a rocky desert, right? Versus, a jungle, those are extremely different environments, and you need to account for that. And you can actually turn that into something that's important for the game. I appreciate that.
As someone who studied drinking in college, I am delighted that the tavern is a terrain type. I think that's very good.
Yes, I agree.
It's amazing,
yeah.
right? It's amazing.
Yeah. But that's what makes this section D&D, though, right? I mean,
that's true.
very D&D.
It's just, it's very funny to me what they include and what they don't, because dungeon doesn't get any kind of terrain type, but by God, ship, tavern, and town street do. Because, and in fairness, dungeon can be generalized, but
dungeon gets caves, right? There's a cave section, and there's I guess there is no dungeon type. Yeah, interesting.
But dungeon wouldn't be any one thing in D&D.
Right.
In fairness,
that's true. Yeah. It is interesting. The list they chose is interesting. I'll say that.
Yeah. And they're trying to remind you that you can have, a good, interesting scrap anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
and that's there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Sure.
I would suggest that for most D&D usage, the distinction between marsh and swamp is lost on most people.
Right. Well, and that's one of those where, okay, they really put both of those in there? Like,
oh yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
I mean, I know, but but that's the what I like to call the Gygax influence, right? It's sort of like, also most of us can't tell, the difference between the 10 types of pole arms,
Right.
but he could and would use the names and mean very specific things about them in a way that was important to him.
Yeah.
Same with, swamps and marshes, in a way.
So what I will say about this whole chapter is that if you have the time and brain power to turn all of this into a large operational area with a map that sort of engages everything that's going on in this chapter in terms of visibility, encounter distance, obstacles, fighting in unusual conditions, water features, climbing, aerial combat. Like, yeah, that's actually awesome. No problem. You're doing a good job. It's a ton of work to implement all of the stuff going on here, but there is some interest gleaned from that, and you're going to feel like that rock has dragged you over 10 miles of hard road because the book tells you how.
Right. This is a little distilled wilderness survival guide with a tutorial for the DM on how to make a map that is topographically interesting and that the players can understand when they look at it. And then in true second edition fashion, you get the, all of the mechanical little pluses and minuses and different ideas about, how far you can see and what bonuses you get and all this, that, and the other. It actually is a really quite enjoyable chapter.
Right. It's like the good side is if used as intended and if you sink in the time, it does pay you. The bad side is it takes a lot of time.
Yeah,
like, it's
that
a lot.
sink, that time sink is huge. Yes.
Yes.
Although I will say that the fighting in unusual conditions section has, once again, here's this direct line between vision and movement and things like that, directly from here to more modern editions.
Yep. Then you get combat on other planes. There's a actually fairly brief section on astral and ethereal combat, so that's kind of cool. And it gets into how you use intelligence in place of strength and wisdom in place of dexterity. So that's calculating on the fly, but you're going into the astral. Like, you had to know something was going to get weird.
Which, in 5th edition, if you really want to throw your players for a loop and you want to put them to a different plane and you want them to not understand what's going on at first, do that.
Yeah. And the ethereal combat section is actually fine and wouldn't actually be out of place in 5th edition as written. It's fine. Then you get effects of magic on the battlefield, so it goes through a bunch of spells and magic items and how those engage with larger battlefields. And really a lot of it is about applying these spells to the rules of combat and tactics more than it's about battlefields, qual battlefields.
Right.
Because it's telling you the initiative phases of some of this stuff, which has nothing to do with this chapter at all, but that's fine. It had to fit somewhere, and I guess this is a place you could put it. So yeah, I mean, this chapter is brief and dense, but not without some interest. If for some reason you really... Well, actually, let me put that differently. If you are the kind of ultra-dedicated person who can build a full terrain display, so that your characters are going to be covering all of those hills and bluffs and rocky defiles and creeks and so on, then this does have some extra payoff to offer you in terms of being able to look up exactly how everything should work over that whole field that you've so lovingly crafted.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, for the extreme power user, there's maybe more here than meets the eye.
I think the problem that this chapter has, this chapter 3, I think the problem it has is they will find a much easier association with it, with a setting book, than they would with a combat book. Even though, I mean, I understand why it's in here, but I feel like it's almost like I could imagine, someone reading this and talking about, all these specialized combat abilities and moves and all that, and then they get to the swamp. The swamp hardcover is available within 1d6 squares of any character. Concealment's available anywhere. You're knee deep in water sometimes. Okay, what? Like, I could see people basically glossing over this chapter because it's not as interesting if they're really getting this book for the combat.
Right.
I think it suffers from that, is I guess my point.
I think that's pretty fair. But, reminding people to vary up the topography of their battlefield is not a bad suggestion by any stretch of the imagination.
Oh, no. I think it's totally fair. Absolutely. Absolutely.
But breaking down hills to different levels is maybe a little...
well, it takes a level of dedication that you might not be
experiencing
or interested in at that point, right? Although I have to say, sometimes, like, for example, the topographical map thing, just seeing the little tutorial here and reading about what it is actually could help looking at some of those first and second edition topographical maps they have in some of the older modules, just seeing the lines and for someone new who wasn't really experienced with those, this might suddenly make some light bulbs go off.
Yep.
All right, well, that's going to be the end of this episode, the 5th day of Christmas, Combat and Tactics Part 2. We hope you have a wonderful holiday season.
Thanks, everybody.